Hey everybody, it's me, just making another video. I tried to finish this part 1 video, but my phone ended up ringing, so I'm doing this video all over again, and it was a shame too because that video was starting to look good. But anyhow, this is going to be my top 25 Great American Bash pay-per-view matches, in my opinion, of all time. Just thought I'd give you a top 25 countdown on some of the best Great American Bash matchups, kind of getting you ready for the Bash, which is this Sunday. It's going to be kind of hard thinking about that pay-per-view, seeing as what happened yesterday with the two entertainers that died, but try to get over it and try to erase what happened, but you really can't because it's just something that just happened and you just really can't erase it. So getting to the top 25, starting with this video, I go with the top 25, starting with number 25. It's from the Great American Bash 2007, which was between John Cena and Bobby Lashley. Now, really going into this matchup, really wasn't expecting much from this matchup. I was expecting maybe a 1 or maybe a dud to begin with, because at the time I really wasn't sold on Bobby Lashley, and I felt that he wasn't that good of a wrestler, and I thought Cena was just an okay wrestler at the time. But when these two clash and the two styles clash that these two had, these two had a really good matchup, and it was way better than what I expected, as Bobby Lashley actually showed up in this matchup and put some effort into this. And Cena, even though most people he gets a bad rap for his 5 moves of doom and not having good matches and sometimes not selling moves, he was able to put on a damn good matchup right here against a wrestler who wasn't really that known for putting on good matches, and which is Bobby Lashley. He was able to carry Bobby Lashley to a watchable matchup, a good matchup at best. These two worked their ass off. They sold for each other. Bobby Lashley looked dominant in this matchup. John Cena looked like John Cena, proved why he was the #1 guy in the WWE, and these two just put on a clinic, and this was just a very good matchup and a lot better than what I expected coming into the Great American Bash 2007. And in the end, John Cena ended up beating Bobby Lashley with the attitude adjustment off the top rope, which I haven't really seen him do that move before, but it was the first time I seen him do it. And because really going into the matchup, John Cena put him in the attitude adjustment a couple times, but Bobby Lashley kicked out. But finally, he had to beat him with the attitude adjustment off of the top rope, and that's what put Bobby Lashley away. But otherwise, this was a very good matchup, and probably something most people really didn't expect, as this match just exceeded all my expectations. As like I said, when I saw this matchup, before I seen it, I had low expectations for this matchup, but seeing it just blew all my expectations away, as this was just a good matchup, and these two just worked their butt off and put on a really good matchup. At number 24, I had Triple H versus John Cena, but that was from the Night of Champions. I keep forgetting about that, so I put number 24, which was the number 24 matchup I just added in, was Perry Saturn versus Kanyon. Now, really, this was a quick matchup. Really, it could have been longer because Kanyon was a good worker and Saturn was a good worker, but still, it was a good matchup for the time that was given. You saw a lot of innovative moves from Kanyon, which in my opinion, to this day, I still think Kanyon is very underrated, and he doesn't get a lot of credit that he should be getting. But that's just me, and in my opinion, I think Saturn is a very underrated worker as well. As shown in this matchup, he worked real hard in this matchup. It also had a story involved in this, where Saturn was doing Raven's dirty work to keep Kanyon away from Raven, and Kanyon wanted the match against Saturn in order for him to get his hands on Raven. And it was just a really good storyline, and it had some twists and turns, like couple months after this pay-per-view. But other than that, this was a very good matchup. Like I said, you saw some innovative spots, you saw some run-ins by the Flock and Raven, and overall just a very entertaining matchup that if it was given enough time, it would have been easily maybe a good 4-star, maybe good 4.5 star matchup. But instead, it was a 3-star matchup for the time it was given, but it still doesn't make it a bad matchup. This was a very good matchup, but I just wish it was given some time. Then moving on to number 23, it's the Great American Bash from 1992 for the WCW World Heavyweight title. It was the matchup between Sting versus Vader, and man, was this match really good. The hype for this matchup was just off the charts, as Sting was just coming off victories over Ric Flair and many of the top guys in WCW. He was beating everybody. He was beating many of the top guys in WCW, and then he ran into a guy who was just dominating most of the guys in WCW, and really a guy that most people just didn't think could be stopped, and that just proved it in this matchup. As you had two of the hottest wrestlers in WCW going into that pay-per-view, squaring off against each other, and what you got was a very good matchup with Sting selling the ribs, and Vader looking like the monster, and Sting looking like Sting, and in the end, Vader ended up beating Sting and ending Sting's long title run, and Vader would hold on to the belt for a while before, I guess, losing it to Sting again, and then beating Sting, and then losing it finally to Ric Flair in 1993. But still, this was the match that put Vader and Sting on top in WCW, and it just made Vader, it made people talk about Vader even more, and Vader became a monster, and what made people talk about Vader, and Vader was just a monster. He was built as a monster, and he became an even bigger monster after beating Sting, because it just proved how unstoppable he was after this matchup. But still, very good matchup, good big man, little man matchup between two, and it just showed them how much chemistry these two had, because these two went on to face each other numerous times in WCW, and every time these two had a match against each other, they would always be good, because these two just had that real strong chemistry in their matchup, and that was the case with this matchup, as the chemistry between these two was just real good. And that's why I got it at number 23. Number 22 comes from the Great American Bash 1989 for the WCW World Heavyweight title. This was between two veterans, Ric Flair, who was one of the hottest wrestlers around that time, and Terry Funk, who was a legend in his own. And when you had these two square off against each other, you had a really good matchup. These two beat the hell out of each other, and these two both looked good heading into this matchup, and in the end, Ric Flair ended up beating Terry Funk in what I found to be a really good, entertaining matchup, and it just proved how underrated Terry Funk as a worker was watching this matchup, because he doesn't get as much credit as he did back then, but to me, he's just a very good worker, and he's one of the wrestlers that most people tend to not talk about, but still, very good matchup. One of the reasons why I got it at number 22. Number 21 comes from the Great American Bash 1995. This was a match featuring Alex Wright and Brian Pillman. Most people are going to say, why'd you put this on here? To me, this was a very good matchup between two high flyers at the time. You had Alex Wright, who was a rookie at the time in WCW. You had Flying Brian Pillman, who was still Flying Brian Pillman before the injury got to him. Well, he got in that car accident, and these two just put on a phenomenal matchup, which saw Brian Pillman make Alex Wright look like $1 million. He sold for Alex Wright. Alex Wright as well did the same thing for Brian Pillman. You saw a lot of high-flying moves and a lot of reversals and counters in this matchup. And then in the end, Alex Wright put Brian Pillman in a German suplex or some kind of cradle move, and that will be the end of the match. But still, very good match. To me, one of the most underrated matches to me in wrestling history, as most people don't really tend to talk about this, but this was a very good matchup, and it showed why Brian Pillman should have got pushed more than what he was getting around that time in WCW. But this was WCW, the Hogan era, where only Hogan and his friends got pushed, and many of the guys like Ric Flair and Brian Pillman and other guys like that, they really didn't get their chance to shine, and thus they were pushed to the side. But to me, just felt that Brian Pillman, this was the match that pretty much showed that Brian Pillman could be considered a main eventer, or at least contend for a U.S. title or something like that. But that was never the case, and thus Brian Pillman just had a really bad career in WCW because of the booking. Anyhow, stay tuned for part 2. I'm out.